This is a real honor and a privilege to be speaking at the India Link annual awards and annual lecture on the occasion of the 21st anniversary of India Link. And it is a magazine that I've known from the day I started in business, all through my parliamentary career. A constant is India Link magazine and Krishan Rally. And my hats off to them on what he has done day in and day out in promoting UK-India relations in such a wonderful way, and that has benefited the Indian community here in the UK enormously, and a magazine that is read in India as well. So it's a great privilege to be part of it.
Chairman, distinguished honour guests, ladies and gentlemen, please pray silence for Lord Karan Bilimoria, who will give the annual lecture on India-Britain alliance as smart powers on the world stage. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Dr. Virendra Paul, Deputy High Commissioner, my Lords, Sir Mota Singh, who's been a great inspiration to me throughout my career here in the UK, the first Indian ever to become a judge. Dr. Satyapal Sharma, thank you for your welcome. And most importantly, to Krishan Rally and Vijay Rally. It is remarkable what you have done in creating and running and publishing India Link for 21 years. I have here C.B. Patel, someone who I'd known from the day I started in business, whose son was at Cambridge with me. And C.B. was saying to me just now, he has been one of the most eminent publishers, Asian publishers in this country. And he said, he's been doing it for 40 years. He's for somebody to be here 21 years later, not just surviving, but doing so well and having done an amazing job. Hats off from C.B. Patel. To give this lecture, following in the footsteps of another individual who's always inspired me, been a mentor to me, Lord Paul. Lord Paul, thank you for what you've always done for the community, and I'm humbled to follow in your footsteps in delivering this lecture. I do, and we've got Bob Blackman here, Member of Parliament, who's been a great friend of the Indian community. Thank you for being here as well. And I do want to single out, there are many people I could single out, but I do want to single out one other person. I will mention others who's here, who's sitting very quietly over there, and that's Mr. Satya, the founder of Asian Who's Who and the Asian of the Year Award, who's always in the background, has never received recognition for what he has done year in, year out for our community. If I take you to South India many, many years ago, there were two young brothers. The nearest school in Kerala for these brothers was a little village 6 kilometers away. And the brothers would walk to school, and only the older brother got a place in the school. The younger brother did not get a place. The younger brother would sit outside the older brother's classroom, and it was a hut basically, the school. And the older brother would pass the textbooks through the window to the younger brother. That is the only way this younger brother could start learning. And of course, eventually, the young boy got a place at school, and he was very bright. He was so clever that years later, he got a scholarship to the London School of Economics. They were so poor, it took the family a year to raise the money just to buy the clothes for him to come to the UK, and to defer his admission by a year. Came to the LSE, excelled, joined the Foreign Service, became head of the Foreign Service, and then eventually became the first Dalit President of India, President Narayana, who I had the privilege of knowing. That story tells you that anyone can get from anywhere to anywhere. There is nothing to stop anyone with all the prejudices that may exist. You can get anywhere. And I go back to India, and I actually went to school in Trivandrum for 2 years, to the Loyola School, a Jesuit school, when my father was commanding his battalion of Gurkhas there. And the India that I remember from my childhood was an India that was a closed country, a closed economy, inward-looking, protective. It was an India where consumers were starved of choice. It was an India which was run by a few business families and no one else got a look in. It was an India where people like Swaraj Paul took a stand, and that took a lot of guts. And when I set up Cobra in 1989, 1990, this is our 25th anniversary, just a little older than India Link. And I remember then, the India was still that India. But I believed that that India would one day open up. I believed India would liberalize. And sure enough, in 1991, India did liberalize. Gurcharan Das, the famous author and journalist, produced a book called India Unbound. India actually was unleashed. And yet, in spite of this liberalization, in the 1990s, the Indian political situation was very, very fluid. We had periods when you had one prime minister after another, literally one after another. And there was great instability politically. And yet in 2002, I spotted, finally, that the India growth story was taking off and the Indian economy started to take off, where growth rates started to hit nearly 10%, well over 8%. And in 2003, I was appointed the UK chair of the Indo-British Partnership, and it was absolutely fabulous. Things were finally beginning to take place. And I founded the UK India Business Council. And I remember then you had the BJP in power in 1999 to 2004, and that BJP government was doing so brilliantly economically. Here was the economy booming, and yet in 2004, they were thrown out. Why? When you're economically so successful. And of course, the reason was because that growth was not seen to be inclusive enough. And you then had a Congress government for 10 years. And I was on Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's advisory council for 5 years. And I saw that government in operation. And I saw the challenges that India has. And without a doubt, India is the most diverse, plural country, but diverse in every way, in terrain, in race, in religion, in every way. It is the most diverse country in the world. And I saw that the India that had been unleashed, one thing powered it forward that to this day is the vibrant and free press that India has, represented here in the UK by people like Christian Raleigh and India Link. And I also saw India's capabilities with all its challenges. But then what about this country? This country, which I came to in the early 80s, was looked upon as a sick man of Europe. This country was a country with no respect in the world economy whatsoever. This country was a country where I was told by my family and friends in the early 80s that if you ever decide to stay and work after your studies, remember, you will never get to the top. You will not be allowed to get to the top as a foreigner because there will be a glass ceiling for you. And they were absolutely right 3 decades ago. Today, we've seen the transformation in this country, how that glass ceiling has been shattered. Looking around this room, people who've shattered that glass ceiling. Today, Britain, far from being the sick man of Europe, is the envy of Europe and a hugely successful economy. And Britain's soft power, I could talk for hours on Britain's soft power. The BBC, whatever we may criticize the BBC within Britain, we should always be grateful for the BBC. The world admires the BBC. And British music, whether it's pop music, rock music, the Beatles, Queen, Rolling Stones, whether it's classical music, our royal family, our creative industries, our sport, our schools, most famous schools in the world, Eton, Harrow we've heard about, British schools. This little country with less than 1% of the world's population came third in the Olympics and Paralympics. 1% of the world's population and third in the Olympics and Paralympics. I could just keep going on. Our universities are the best in the world along with the United States. At any one time, 1 in 7 world leaders have studied in the United Kingdom, including the Greek finance minister. The former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, was a graduate of both Oxford and Cambridge. You can't buy that sort of soft power. The institutions this country has are just phenomenal. Just look at London, the amazing museums that we have, the amazing royal societies. Just in the medical profession alone, each one of the royal societies of surgeons, physicians, gynecologists, obstetricians, oncologists, you could just go on. Each one world-class and best of the best in the world. I'm proud to be the 7th Chancellor of the University of Birmingham. Anthony Eden, when he was Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, was for 27 years, and he continued to be Chancellor even when he was Prime Minister. That wouldn't happen today. And later this month, I will be bestowing an honorary doctorate on Ajit Seth, who just stepped down as Cabinet Secretary in India. The University of Cambridge, my alma mater, has won 90 Nobel Prizes, more than any other university in the world. One college at Cambridge, Trinity College, has been awarded 32 Nobel Prizes. Another college where Stephen Hawking is a fellow and professor, Gonville and Keyes College, where Homi Bhabha went, where Sadhurab Tata went. 13 Nobel Prizes, one college. This is the power of British education. I went to Milan, where the World Expo is taking place as we speak. And I went to speak in the opening week of the Milan Expo with the British ambassador in Italy, with the head of UK Trade and Investment. And I went to visit our pavilion, and every country in the world has a pavilion at the Expo. They are very impressive pavilions, because these pavilions are showing off that country and its capabilities. And do you know the most creative pavilion, by far, at the Milan Expo is the British pavilion? You walk into it, it's like walking into a garden, and there is this huge giant steel structure, which is a beehive with flashing lights. And the flashing lights are the movements and the behavior of a live beehive at Nottingham University here that is being transmitted over there, with the queen bee and her activities, with music and humming going on, replicating what a beehive is doing in this huge structure. That is how creative we are as a country, the most creative by miles in the Expo. This is the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo. I visited the battle site just outside Brussels earlier this year. And the Duke of Wellington, the great hero of the Battle of Waterloo, his motto was, "Fortune favors the brave." And do you know, the Battle of Waterloo wasn't just Wellington defeating Napoleon. Yes, that happened. But what it really demonstrated was the power of allies. It wasn't just the British against the French. It was the Dutch. It was the Germans. If Blucher, Marshal Blucher, the Prussian German general, had not arrived to help Wellington, Wellington would have lost. And those allies stopped Napoleon, a brilliant man, but a man who wanted to conquer the whole of Europe. And that resulted in 100 years of peace in Europe until the dreadful First World War that we've got the centenary we're commemorating. Just look at that unity and peace. And here we have Greece with its financial problems. I don't think we should ever take for granted the European Union and the peace that it has brought in Europe for over 7 decades. Going back to Britain's power, design. We are brilliant at design. The most valuable company in the world, soon to be $1 trillion company, the first ever $1 trillion company, Apple. The chief designer of Apple is Sir Jonathan Ives, a Brit. Our architects, Germany is seen as the most powerful country in Europe. Well, if you go and see the German parliament, the Reichstag, it was rebuilt by Lord Foster, a British architect. The Higgs boson that was just discovered, oh, by the way, Higgs is a Brit. And the Higgs boson was discovered in Geneva at CERN, this amazing laboratory, and I was taken around CERN by Sir Tejinder Verdi, Indian origin, British professor, Imperial College, one of the heads that discovered the Higgs boson. And who was the other head of Atlas that discovered the Higgs boson? Professor Dave Charlton of Birmingham University. So there again, this is revolutionary finding done by people from Britain. Oh, and by the way, when I was there, I was shown the computer lab at CERN, and there was a sign saying the person who worked here discovered the internet and created the internet in 1989. Tim Berners-Lee. And then there was a sign there saying that in 1993, the internet was free to use in the world. So Britain being at the heart of transforming the world. London as a financial center, despite the financial crisis, is still the #1 financial center in the world. And the House of Lords had a committee on soft power chaired by my noble friend Lord Howe. And speaking at the launch of this report on soft power, Lord Howe, the chairman of the committee, commented recently on a group of Japanese visitors who'd been given a tour of Britain. And they said, what was the highlight of the visit? And they said, a visit to the Burberry store. Now, you know, British brands. There are so many British brands that are just doing so brilliantly around the world. But the British brand that Britain needs to promote more than anything else is Britain itself, because the world does not appreciate Britain's powers and capabilities. And that's why the great campaign, I think, that the Foreign Office has got going on within Britain and around the world is necessary and is actually being a huge success. And Professor Nye of Harvard University, he gave evidence to the House of Lords Committee, and he said the crux of international relations today is not just whose army wins, it is also whose story wins in the information age. And talking about armies, hard power is important as well. Soft power on its own is useless without hard power. And there I think we're in a really dangerous position here in the UK, where the government is refusing to commit 2% of GDP spend on defense, which is a NATO commitment. We are one of the most powerful defense forces in the world, and yet we do not have aircraft carriers, thanks to Defense Review 5 years ago, until another 5 years from now. We do not have marine reconnaissance aircraft because we destroyed our Nimrods, and we've got Russian submarines coming into our waters without the capability of surveillance. We don't have our Harriers that were on our carriers. Our British Army is now coming down to the level where 82,000, we cannot even fill Wembley Stadium. And I think with all the problems we've got around the world, with ISIL, with what's happening in Ukraine, we cannot afford to shrink our defense forces, and we should be spending at least 2%. And this is the 200th anniversary of the Gurkhas. And my father, the late Lieutenant General Bilimoria, was Commander-in-Chief of the Central Indian Army, but also head of the Gurkhas, President of the Gurkha Brigade in India, commanded his battalion in the liberation of Bangladesh. And a fellow Zoroastrian Parsi, Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw, called Sam Bahadur by the Gurkhas, said of the Gurkhas, if a man says that he's not afraid of dying, he's either lying or he's a Gurkha. And I was privileged to lead the debate on the Gurkhas on the 200th anniversary in the House of Lords, the day after the pageant at the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, which was attended by the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, and Prince Charles and Prince Harry. So Britain has amazing capability in manufacturing as well. We have world-beating capabilities in manufacturing, but on the other hand, our manufacturing industry is now just 10% of our GDP. We have parliamentarians now, represented by Lord Lumba over here, of Indian origin, Lord Paul. In 1987, when I was at Cambridge, I remember great celebrations because we had an Indian MP elected for the first time since India's independence here in the UK, Keith Vaz. You know, the first Indian MPs going back to 1892 were all Parsis. Dadabhai Naoroji, 1892, Parsi. 1895, Samantaji Bhavnagri, Parsi. 1922, Chapudi Sakatwara, Parsi. One Liberal, one Conservative, one Labour. And I'm the first Zoroastrian Parsi in the House of Lords, and I'm a crossbench peer, so I've squared the circle. And there was one peer, hereditary peer, Lord Sinha. Those were the 4 Indian parliamentarians before India's independence. Then a big gap, and then Lord Chitnis, who was at Birmingham University with my mother, a liberal peer, became a peer. That was it until Keith Vaz in 1987. And I remember we celebrated the 25th anniversary of this first group of ethnic minority MPs in 1987. In 2012, we stood on the steps of Westminster Hall, and there were 69 of us of ethnic minorities on those steps, from 4, 5 to 69. We've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go. Indian food we've been eating this evening, Cobra beer, all India's soft power. If you visit Imperial College, right here in Kensington, middle of Imperial College, there is a tower in the square of quadrangular Imperial College. That tower is called the Queen's Tower. It's called the Queen's Tower because in 1887, it was erected to commemorate the Golden Jubilee of Queen Victoria. Lots of things happened because of a Golden Jubilee. This whole concept of Buckingham Palace garden parties, the first garden party was held at Buckingham Palace to celebrate Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. And there at the bottom of this plaque, you can go and see it right now. Go there tomorrow, you will see this plaque that says, this tower, Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee, Her Majesty Queen Victoria, Empress of India. Empress of India. The biggest empire, most powerful empire the world has ever known. And yet, now there is no empire. Now the army is less than Wembley Stadium's capacity. And we had the visit of General Dalbir Singh, Suhag, who is now the chief of the Indian Army from my father's regiment, the 5th Gurkha Rifles Frontier Force. And I was with the general here. I said, General, how big is the Indian Army today? 1.3 million. 1.3 million. So India has huge hard power. India needs huge hard power. India's in an area of huge instability around it, and historically with issues with its neighbors, whether the issues in Sri Lanka, whether there were issues in liberating Bangladesh, whether there are issues with China, whether there are issues with Pakistan, India needs hard power, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made that a priority. And when it comes to manufacturing may be 10% of our GDP. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has the Make in India initiative, where he is targeting India's manufacturing to go up from 16% to 25% of GDP. And I think we should have a target of getting our manufacturing in this country to a specific percentage in the way that India has. And talking about UK, India, I was in India, arrived back today, and I was driving from Chandigarh via Haryana to Delhi, driving down this amazing 4-lane highway. Suddenly on the left, I was out of Chandigarh, in between Chandigarh and Delhi, we came to a town called Karnal. Now, Karnal is not a huge city. Karnal is a town, and there I saw the most impressive Jaguar Land Rover showroom I've ever seen in the world, owned by Tatas. And today I was with the Jaguar team, and Jaguars are great cars. I think Farooq, you drive a Jaguar as well. And you know, Jaguar Land Rover, nobody wanted to buy that company in 2008, and Tata's bought that company when nobody wanted to buy it. Their sales fell off a cliff in the financial crisis. They stuck by it, they invested in it, in design, in innovation. I was with their chief engineer today. Today, Jaguar Land Rover makes more profits every year than they paid for the whole company when nobody wanted to buy it in 2008. And the strongest form of India's soft power, by the way, here sitting in this room, the 25 million people of Indian origin that are now reaching the very top around the world in every field, whether it's governors in the United States of America, some of the wealthiest, most successful businessmen in the world, whether it's right here in this room, the people in this room, the Indian community is reaching the very top of the world. MasterCard is run by an Indian, Ajay Banga. The new head of Deloitte, the firm of accountants, is an Indian. And I could just go on with Indians now leading the world. And of course, with our two countries, we've got cricket putting the two countries together. And no better example than my childhood hero, my lifelong hero, Farooq Engineer, who's here with us today. And I'll never forget when I first met him, when I came as a student to this country, and I met him, and I remember an event at the High Commission. I was so excited about it. And I said, you know, you were my childhood hero. I remember you were the best wicketkeeper in the world. He said, no. I wasn't the best wicketkeeper in the world. I was the very best. And you know, here is somebody where a journalist said to him, like Don Bradman, you made a century before lunch, didn't you? He said, no, I didn't. I made it by hitting the first ball for a 6 after lunch. He was 94 not out before lunch. This is a legend. So Farooq, thank you for being here and for being an inspiration to us all. And of course, India's soft power could go on. Bollywood, Indian music, Indian classical music, Indian classical dancing. We've seen Palomi did such a great, beautiful dance earlier. We should give her a huge round of applause again, I think. You know, she's here. Ravi Shankar. I remember once when Ravi Shankar was speaking at the Nehru Center, and I met him, and what a legend. And there he spoke about how he communicates with an audience. And he said anyone can play an impressive rag, and with a great flourish. He said any well-trained sitarist can do that. I can do that. That's not how I've connected with my audience. I connect with my audience where every string I pluck plucks every heart of every individual in the room. That was what made him the greatest ever Indian classical musician. So we have those are the legends that India has. Yoga. I was privileged when Prime Minister Narendra Modi made UN have International Yoga Day in June, the 21st of June, which is the summer equinox. And we had the High Commissioner in Parliament, and I had my fellow parliamentarians, Bob Blackman was there, witness to this, where we conducted yoga in Parliament. We had mindfulness, meditation, office yoga in our suits, which you can do at your desk, breathing exercises from Sri Sri Ravi Shankar's institution, and Wellington College, where my older daughter goes to school, named after the Duke of Wellington, created by Queen Victoria. Every child at Wellington College is taught mindfulness. And that, of course, all from India. And as the Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, on the other hand, I have one bone to pick with this government and the coalition government, and that is their immigration policy. I think that is harming UK-India relations. I think it's harming Britain's soft power. And I've seen at universities the damaging rhetoric that this has. When Theresa May, as Home Secretary before the election, said, I want every foreign student to leave the day they graduate. George Osborne, the Chancellor, had to step in and say, no, we will not do that. Taking away the 2-year post-graduation work visa from foreign students, that was a mistake. Including foreign students in immigration figures and setting an net immigration target of the tens of thousands is wrong. Foreign students are not immigrants. They're here as students. They're one of the biggest exports that Britain has, £13 billion. They enrich our universities. They build generation-long links. And we should not jeopardize that at all. We should be encouraging foreign students. And if you ask the British public, they love the fact we have foreign students here. If you ask the British public and survey them, do you think foreign students should be allowed to work in the UK after they graduate? 75% of them say, yes, they should be allowed to work here after they graduate. So I think the government is out of tune there, and I think they should clamp down on illegal immigration. But when it comes to students, we should be setting targets to increase the number of international students, particularly from countries like India. The British Premier League. Everyone now in India, I go around, Manchester United has shops in India. Indians now follow British football. The exchange of academics between universities is phenomenal. I just launched an initiative with the British Council called Generation UK India, where 25,000 British students are now going to go and experience India over the coming years. Hundreds of them a year have started going to experience India, and they all want to go back to India. The Sirius program, which I helped to launch, is encouraging foreign graduates to come and open up their businesses here in the UK. And entrepreneurship in India, look how it's flourishing. Narayan Murthy of Infosys and the charitable work that he does. Azim Premji of Wipro and the thousands of schools that he has funded. This is an inspiration to us all. So before I conclude, I do want to talk about one individual, Mahatma Gandhi. CB and I were talking about Gujarat. Lord Paul says he's just been to Gujarat recently. I was in Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar earlier this year, and I went to Mahatma Gandhi's ashram. And there you have some of his old papers were brought out. It was a privilege to see them. And his whole thing was about right against might. He took on the whole British Empire and beat the British Empire of right against might. And I always say in business, it is better to fail doing the right thing than to succeed doing the wrong thing. And Mahatma Gandhi was a great inspiration. And keeping a country together, India, it is a miracle that India stays together. It is so diverse. And here we, a small little country like the UK, there is a danger of the UK falling apart, with the Scottish SNP now having 56 MPs, and their sole objective is to break away from the United Kingdom. With a yes, in or out referendum in the EU coming up here in Britain, and I think we need to keep things together. So before I conclude, I'd like to just read a poem. It's my favorite poem. We just sang the Indian national anthem. Well, that was written by Rabindranath Tagore, our Nobel laureate from India. And my favorite poem of his is this, if I may just read it. It's very short. Where the mind is without fear, and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. That poem says it all about the UK, about India, about Europe. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he's got his plan about democracy, demography, demand. He's got his dreams. He says that India's changing fast, India's growing fast, India's moving faster than expected, India's learning even faster, India's readier even before, and yet India's challenges are as great as ever before. Corruption still has not been eradicated. The license rod still exists. It is a challenge. It is huge. Prime Minister Modi is all-powerful, but yet he lost an election under his nose in Delhi. And now we've got the Bihar elections coming up this year. And running a country like India, I contributed to a book called The New Bihar by N.K. Singh. And in that, we're trying to say, how did Bihar, the state where we have a brewery, we now brew Cobra in Punjab, Haryana, and Bihar. And when I started brewing in Bihar, people said, Karan, you going to Bihar? Are you serious? Have you got armed guards? Have you got kidnap insurance? And of course, they were talking about the Bihar over a decade ago. The Bihar now, under Nitish Kumar, to his credit, crime went down 6 times in 6 years. Bihar is now a completely different Bihar to the perception that people had. And it's about governance, it's about growth, it's about inclusiveness, it's about investment. And I'm delighted that Prime Minister Modi is now going to be coming to the UK. I hope it's definite. I believe it'll be later this year in the autumn, because the last official Prime Ministerial visit we had from an Indian Prime Minister, I chaired the UK-India Investment Summit between Prime Minister Tony Blair and Dr. Manmohan Singh at Lancaster House in 2006. So the message to Prime Minister Modi is, please come to Britain. We're waiting to receive you. And the India that I close with, I was driving from the brewery in Bihar, in Beta, to Patna, through rural India. And there I saw 4 mobile phone masts in a village, 4 mobile phone masts. And there, as the sun was setting, I saw 3 buffaloes with children riding on the buffaloes, back from the fields to the village. Hundreds of millions of mobile phone users, the biggest in the world. Vodafone is now number 3 in the world thanks to India. And there, juxtaposed with that, was children on buffaloes, a scene you would have seen thousands of years ago in India. That is the magic of India. That is the miracle of India. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi is a brilliant orator in Hindi, and in his speeches he often uses the word takat. He keeps saying takat, strength, power. And Professor Joseph Nye of Harvard University says that if you have a combination of hard power and soft power, you have smart power. And I think Britain has smart power. And I think India has smart power. And together we can be the smartest of powers. And so where Mahatma Gandhi is concerned, I conclude, I was very proud to be on the committee that set up the statue. We had our first meeting in July. last year, and the statue was unveiled in March. Government can move quickly when it wants to. And my favorite quote of Mahatma Gandhi's, if I may paraphrase it, is this, because I believe in India and the UK and their potential together in the future, because your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits form your character, and your character determines your destiny. Thank you very much, Christian, and congratulations to you.
Distinguished honour guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to call on the Chief Editor of India Link International, Mr. Christian Raleigh, who will give his vote of thanks to Her Majesty's Deputy Lieutenant and Commander of the Excellent Order of the British Empire, Lord Karan Bilimoria.
My lords, MPs and ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank